Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining our second webcast for the Tech Entrepreneurship Nanodegree program through Udacity. Today, we have a very special entrepreneur guest, Michael Sawitz. In a second, we'll let Michael introduce himself, but I just wanted to let you guys know that for this webcast, it's very much so open forum. Go ahead and use the Slido link that's posted in the YouTube chat channel. As also the one that we emailed you and it's up in the forums as well. So go ahead and post questions whenever you would like, whenever they're on your mind, and we'll be sure to try and address those in a timely manner. All right, so Michael, can you give us a good introduction about all of your experiences and just how amazing it's been to go through the whole process of being an entrepreneur?
It has, Michael. And by the way, thank you. I really appreciate your invitation and your confidence to let me talk to your students.
For sure.
I grade on the curve, just know that. I'm kidding. Hi, everyone. For me, this is career number 3. And I started out in the apparel industry with companies like Bugle Boy and OP, Ocean Pacific, and things like that. Did very well. Back in the day, got paid like a rock star. But for that, I was gone all the time. I was gone weeks at a time, and my kids were growing up, and Mama said, hey, we need you, we don't need the cash. And so it was a challenge to leave that industry and do something else. And at that time, I had originally dropped out of college to open my first store. And so here I am, early 30s, going, I don't have a degree in, thermonuclear plastic or, brain surgery or whatever. What am I going to do? And did a bunch of research. And back then, it was on microfiche. There was no internet, and found where the only sector that was going to grow was going to be in the service sector. So I wound up opening up a service business in 85 and turned that into from 1 store to 124 stores that I franchised, and did that for 27 years until this thing called social media. You might have heard about that before.
Tiny bit.
Yeah, raised its ugly head. So as a franchisor, the most important thing is your brand standards. So as far as print and the internet, we had locked those things down long before. But all of a sudden, this thing came up with social media, and our franchisees and the employees to the franchisees were doing all kinds of postings that I couldn't control, yet my brand was linked. So who's better to figure out, a social media strategy, a 60-year-old or a 20-year-old? So I hired a team of students from Cal State Fullerton to help me create a social media standards for my franchise company. And when that project was over, the professor asked me to stay on as a mentor and an entrepreneur in residence. And that was 8 years ago. And that just relit my entrepreneur passions. I had started and sold businesses in between, but this was something different. And after mentoring for almost 4 years, I decided to sell my company. And I love my company. I mean, I had it for 27 years, had 15 great people working here. Some people were with me almost 20 years. But I knew where I needed to go, and that was entrepreneurship and to work with startups. So I sold my company, but I had kept the building I bought back in 2000. I repurposed this building, and now we've got an incubator. We've got 21 super companies here in 21 different verticals, and that's what I do all day long, is help bring them to market. And also I'm an investor. I hate to call myself an angel investor because I work a little differently, but I'm also investing in companies. So that's kind of my story, and I'm sticking with it, Michael.
That's quite an amazing story. I mean, one of the things that I think is very important when anyone is either thinking of becoming an entrepreneur or is put into the position of, kind of needing to do it is kind of that position in their life. Can you say anything about that? I mean, it sounded like for you.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. I would say instead of position in your life, I'd say timing. Because here we've got, I think the youngest we have is 22, and the oldest was 64. And they're all entrepreneurs. Some have had multiple startups and exits, and some this is their first time. Some are, working full time. Some are working on their MBAs and staying up all night and working the rest of the time on their startup. So when it's in you, it's in you. Where it comes out, yeah, it'll be at different times and different ages.
Definitely. I mean, it's kind of amazing because I mean, like in your story, you had decided to discontinue your college education to pursue this thing, and I mean that seems to be a pretty common trend with.
Yeah, but not back then, I got to tell you.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
bet
was
that's true.
like, what are you doing? What? You're dropping out? Yeah, if you dropped out, you were a hippie,
Oh, I
at
see.
that time. Well, and truth be told, I did have long hair and, looked the part, probably acted the part, but that was natural because that first store that I opened was a clothing store, and I fit in. So yeah, dropping out worked for me, but maybe wasn't the smartest thing. I had to get that education somewhere. So the good news is I thrive on learning. I thrive on education, and in the place that I'm sitting now, I am learning mass amounts of things every day, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. Before we kind of segue into the next topic, I know a lot of our students are from a very diverse background, whether it be strictly coding or a mix of kind of
Right.
product development and other stuff. What do you have to say to them about learning to become an entrepreneur? Is it books? Is it experiences? Is it a combination?
It's funny you should bring that up because we have sort of this running debate. Is it nature or nurture, right? Are you born with some kind of entrepreneurial gene or predilection for startups, or is it a learned or acquired set of skills? In fact, we've done some testing here with various tools and analytics to see if there was a commonality between startup founders. And using heat maps and 93 questions run through a pretty significant database and set of algorithms, I can tell you the only commonality is persistence and tenacity. It takes a lot of guts to be a startup founder. You got to be able to weather those 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, night sweats, going, "What am I doing? I'm ruining my life," and all of the other things that happen during the day, and balance that with the awesomeness of being a startup founder. So you have to have guts. Startups, they're not for wimps. So it is that's got to be present. But short of that, so much of this can be learned. If you've got that passion that drives you forward, you can get the knowledge. You can learn the strategies, and you can certainly learn the tactics, the tools, and how to do this.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, it's a great opportunity for everyone. The American dream, right? So as
Yep.
far as kind of you starting off with that one store, how was it like for you to develop that customer base for that one store, and how did you leverage that development to expand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, so part of it was having an empathy for my customer. Um, my customers, 73% ultimately turned out to be small business owners. So it was my cohort, my peer group. So it was easier to relate and to understand what their problems were and work hard to give it to them in the most palatable manner, and in that way I could charge value add. I wasn't pricing on cost plus, which I caution every startup to not get caught into the cost plus pricing strategy, but to work on value add. And that way I opened the second store out of the profits from the first year, and the next year opened the third store. And I built organic growth because I was able to hold good margins.
So we got a student question here. Can you explain the difference between the cost plus and value add strategies?
Sure. Cost plus, it cost me $5. I'm going to sell it for $10. All right. And, that's the mentality. Whatever the sort of industry standard markup, that's cost plus. But what if, they're selling for $10 and you get it for $2? Does that mean at $2 you should sell it for $4? Or at $2 you should sell it at $10 because that's the market? Or at $2 should you sell it for $9 and undercut the market? It's a function of what your cost is plus your markup. And every industry has some kind of a sliding scale. Now that's cost plus. For me, it's value add. It doesn't matter whether it cost you or you got it free. That's not what you're looking at. What you're looking at is, what is it worth to your customer? And to make it worth to your customer, it has to be something more than the sum total of those tangibles. It's the intangible. Sometimes it's easier to do it based on geography or location. For instance, you know what it is to walk into your local bar and buy a beer, right? But what happens when you walk into a baseball stadium and buy the same exact beer? What do you think the price is going to be? A little bit higher, or a lot higher, right? I mean, it's but do people buy? Doggone yes. Why? Because it's the value. Can't get it any other way, right? And that's a location base. But I like value added in that buying yours is intrinsically more valuable to the customer than buying or doing something else. That's building value. Why do people buy Apple products, right? Other products do the same thing, but Apple has a cachet. It has a certain level of quality. It has a certain design and functionality level. Even when you match others with the same functionality, Apple garners a higher price. I was in China, I think 2 months ago, and in China, an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus is $1,100. And of course, they make them there. And I saw them everywhere, where they could have bought a cheaper phone from Korea, right? Or even a Chinese phone, but they wanted that. That's value add, where you create a value that is intrinsic. It is not the cost of the parts or the cost to bring it to market. With value add, you're in control of your margins, you're in control of the reputation and the value of your product. To me, that's always the way to go.
Yeah, no, definitely. We always kind of preach to our students, it's all about the customers. It's all about what value they prescribe to your product.
Right. Yeah. So on the other side, when it gets to be cost plus and it gets into the part of cost plus, which is what we call commodity, then it's the cheapest one, not the one that gives you the best whatever, but it becomes the cheaper one. And the cheaper one, the lowest guy, is always the first guy to go out of business because he doesn't have the margin to run his business, or if the market decides to go left or there's a bump in the road, he doesn't have the margins and the reserves to react. So that's another reason why I don't want to play that game in my businesses. I want to be able to make as much money as I possibly can to build my company, to take care of my team, and still be competitive in the marketplace. So for me, my strategy is to mark it up as high as I can, but never be to the highest in the market. And more important, stay connected with my customers so I know whether they believe they're getting value or not. Well, as soon as they don't believe that I'm giving value, you're either forced to reduce price or to re-engineer and give them something that, once again, they believe is valuable. I hope that answered the student's question.
No, I think that was very comprehensive. Thank you for that. So as far as the relationship between customer and value, when does it become in conflict? Can you describe that? Has it ever in your past kind of hindered your vision?
Yeah, that's when you go out of business. That's again when, you know, there's a fork in the road and you went left and the customer went right. And so if you practice lean, the first component is this, you know, customer development. It's created by Steve Blank and fostered by Eric Ries and others. To me, man, that's the number one component. And it's having that value prop that resonates. If you're those of you who are out there as students, if you're aware of the business model canvases, either the very first one by Alexander Osterwalder or a newer one by Ash Maurya, both speak to the same thing. And it is about finding a customer that has a problem that is so severe that he or she is willing to pay you for your solution. That's the value prop. The stronger the value prop, the higher margin and the faster you can grow if you do it the right way. So it's having this alignment, Michael, if you will, of what the customer's problem is or need set and how seamlessly you can give them what they want. See, you know, for 150, 180 years, we've all been doing it a different way. You know, we've used the business plan. We built a product we believed that somebody wanted, and we built our product lines and then turned it over to the marketing guys who took a look at the features and benefits, created a marketing plan, and went out and spent money to convince people they should buy what we built because we know better than them. And that's sort of the Kevin Costner Field of Dreams, build it and they will come scenario. That doesn't work anymore. What we have now is different. So, you know, we say here, don't make what you sell. Don't make what you can sell. Sell what you can make. There, sorry, got it confused. Which means don't make it. Try to put enough marketing dollars to get rating points and convince enough people. Find out what people want, and that's what you should make. Again, don't sell what you make, right? Make what you can sell, and what you can sell is what people want. So there's a process for that. You know, that's customer development. That's product market fit at its essence. And there's a way to go about that. You just don't go out and ask people, hey, would you buy this? Do you like this? This is my new app. Don't you think it's the coolest thing? You know, that's definitely not the way to go. In fact, if we go back over 100 years and we talk to one of the greatest entrepreneurs ever, which was Henry Ford. Henry Ford, when he was asked, you know, if he asked his customer, you know, about the Model T or what he was building, he said, if I would have asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said they wanted a faster horse, because they had no concept of the technology or where they're going. And I say that to all the students out there: do not ask people what they want. All right, that's not how you go about it. What you need to do is, when you do your questions, your interviews, your surveys, is a methodology. It's qualitative and it's quantitative. The one-on-one interview is critical, but you're not going to ask them, you know, would you buy my app, or don't you think this is cool? What you ask them are behavioral things, are anecdotal history. It's like, Did you ever have a time when you had this problem? Okay, if you did, what did you use to solve that problem, and how did that work for you? And if you didn't have that, what else would you do? And you want to find anecdotally what they did and put in a position, how did they act? You never want them to give you a subjective answer. Yeah, I think this is great, but it should be green instead of blue, or it should be left-handed instead of right. Don't ask your customers those things. Ask them about their problem. You want to detail how serious that problem is. So if we do some kind of scale, on one side, the pain point is low, and in order to solve that problem, you take something like vitamins. Don't have an immediate effect, but over time, maybe keep you healthy, right, or lower your cholesterol or whatever. Right. On the other side of the scale are really painful things. When you have pain, you don't want vitamins. When you have pain, you want a painkiller. You want an aspirin, or if it's really serious, you want morphine or something. So that's the pain, spectrum. You want to find a problem that's, as far to the pain side as you can, because identifying a pain that a customer has and you presenting a solution, again, now you've got that value added pricing. Now you've got where people move towards your product instead of away from you trying to sell them something. I followed a sales guy for a lot of years, and I bought a lot of his books and gave them to my franchisees, a guy by the name of Jeffrey Gitomer. And one of the things he said in the Little Red Book, I think, was critical. He says, no one wants to be sold. And I think if you think about that in terms of yourself, no one wants to be sold. No one wants to be put upon. He said, no one wants to be sold, yet everyone wants to buy. Think about that. When there's stuff you want, right? A drone, a new car, a pair of shoes, or a handbag, what are you willing to do to get it? Most people will give up lunches, starve, whatever, to get what they want when they want it. So it's hard to even stop people from buying the stuff they want. Yet the minute you try to sell them, the that old lizard brain, the part down deep inside that is built on fight or flight kicks in, and we usually leave. So it's about positioning. It's about definitely this value added thing in concert with the things that people really want. And that comes out in this product development, customer development, and product market fit. It's about finding those things. It's about not building anything until you're sure you have those things, and then you only build that. That's what your MVP is built around. Not, okay, we know what the customer wants, let's build the company. That's very dangerous.
So we have another student question, and I would say it relates more or less to the very beginning stages of when you are trying to validate your idea with the customer.
Right.
The student asks, how do I even approach people to ask questions?
Good. Yeah, that's where some of the guts comes in, because here's the thing, that your natural inclination is to run to your friends and family, right? Those are the people you don't want to go to. They love you. They will lie to you, even though they don't think they're lying. They will tell you what they think you want to hear. You've got to go to an anonymous base, right? And it's hard to do this without pre-filtering or filtering. You have to have this open mind. You find people anywhere. You want to do, as founder, you want to do all the interviewing yourself. You don't want to lay it off to a staff member or a paid service. You need to look people in the eye. In fact, you want to see if their pupils dilate when they get excited. You want to see if they get, emotionally involved when they're telling you things. And you want to be able to know when they're BSing you. So you've got to do it yourself. And it's about a learning experience. The things that you learn from your initial customer interviews can't be got anywhere else. It's classic. There's a Vimeo video um, out of Launchpad, USFF, that Steve Blank was running, and one that I showed actually last night here at our incubator to emphasize exactly this point. So if you go to Vimeo and you look for Tide Pool, Tidepool, and it talks about a medical startup at University of California, San Francisco, that went through the 10-week program. And this is classic. I think everybody should watch that, 10 or 12 minutes, and this will show you the power of doing customer surveys, customer interviews. Now, that's not to be confused with a survey. So the interviews, we're asking for, anecdotal history and behavioral. We find key insights from those things. So you go through all your questions, and maybe question 2, 87 people out of 100 answered it one way. Man, that's a key insight. And what we do is try to extract the key insights. And then we have to test them, because just having the qualitative is no good. We've got to back it up with with real data. So we need quantitative. And that's where you'll build a SurveyMonkey survey, or Qualtrics, or one of those, where you're going to push it out to not 100 people, but 1,000 people, 10 questions that are built around these key insights. And hopefully you get 200 responses. And where the quantitative overlaps the qualitative, those are important points. Those are the points of truth. And that's what you should be building your startup on. Do I have a minute to explain a little bit more, Michael?
No, so I think one really key point that you could really help the students understand is, what is the difference between prototyping your design for like an app or something similar to that, and how do you separate that from the original anecdotal research that you're doing? Because a lot of students just want to jump right in. Here's my design. This is solving your problem, right? Type of an interview.
So the methodology of going from key insights to experiments to prove your key insights, because at that point they're a guess. You've guessed. That's your hypothesis that it's that way. We don't want to build a company on a guess. So how do we turn a guess or a hypothesis into fact? Well, you test it. That build, test, learn. So you need to build an experiment to validate or invalidate every one of those key points. And a lot of times the way to build an experiment is by building a very low fidelity prototype. Some people call it a pretotype or pre-prototype. In fact, there is a guy that's over at Google, and again, another, another voice to be heard from, but he's created the Pretotype Manifesto, and that's after having 2 very successful startups, and the third one crashed and burned. And he goes, "What happened here? I know what I'm doing, yet I still failed." And it was because he didn't test it properly. So pretotyping is using very low fidelity. In fact, I've seen people, yes, of course, use a wireframe, a clickable wireframe is on one end of the scale. I've seen people just draw it out, or even I've seen people make for a mobile app. They drew the phone or printed the phone out on a corrugated sheet or pasted up on corrugated for every screen, right? And they would hold it in front of people, this big, 2-foot phone, and say, "What do you see?" okay, and they tell you, and they say, well, push what you push, and they push a button, and they put that one down, and they pick up another one, and that's low fidelity, but that's a way of testing. How do people react to it? There's testing and prototyping should have the smallest, very smallest approach or piece of what you're trying to do. It shouldn't have lots of features. It should be the essence of it. Otherwise, you can't tell what they're reacting to. It's sort of like the difference between A/B testing and multivariate testing. You got to be very sophisticated to do multivariate testing. A/B is a whole lot easier, and that's what we're doing with prototyping.
And then another related question to when you're talking about that stage of kind of the interview to the survey, a student asks, how do you get 1,000 people to even try and send out a survey to?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can always buy them. You could do things, use Mechanical Turk and other things like that. You can find if there's a user group or a place that people hang out. Let's say you're doing something for people with type 2 diabetes. Well, you Google it, you find every meetup, every association, and you push it through those channels. You ask people to give it to someone else. I mean, it's not easy. Some things are easier than others. I mean, I've got a couple of gamers and VR guys here. Man, they've got thousands of people in their contact list, and they know if they push out something to a gamer, especially if it's got the right heading, they're going to get a response. If you're going to send something to a medical doctor, man, that's hard. We've got the lowest numbers when it comes to professionals, but you don't give up. You keep banging away, finding some kind of nexus. You find one person in that group that can be an evangelist, and then it's coming through them, not you. So now Dr. Such and Such sends it to his friends and says, hey, I've been working with this startup. Can you help me out here? And boom, all of a sudden, you have access to doctors where they wouldn't talk to you before. There's always a way to do this thing. It's just not easy.
Definitely. So it's almost like there's even a development stage of people to even ask about.
Yeah.
So then if we could maybe move on to not just looking at overall strategies of customer development or product development, can you touch on, I mean, a lot of our students, probably I'd say almost 100%, are looking to deploy these things in the tech space, the mobile phone app, the web app. I mean, is there vastly any different tactics or?
Yeah, there is. The gamers are really good at this. So they'll do this whole process we're talking about. And when they do their first build, let's call it your beta, you've done prototyping, you've got your key insights, you've answered your questions, you've built an MVP, a minimum viable product, and you got the kind of response you were hoping for, and now you've built your beta. So you can go to private beta, and that's kind of dicey in that, again, private beta means you're inviting people that you know to test. But the gamers, a lot of smart gamers, they launch it in Canada. They may even change the name, not use the name of their final product, but they launch it in Canada, who socially and in most communities economically are parallel to the US, and they see what happens in Canada. If people like it, don't like it, how they react, what the churn rate is, adoption rate, cost of acquisition. They get all that stuff nailed down, and when they're ready to go, they either kill it in Canada and relaunch it under the real name, or they let it keep going in Canada under the stealth name, and they just run two of them. But testing in these kind of marketplaces or private beta is definitely the way to go.
Cool. We have another student question where They're asking, from your experience, how would you clarify the transition from the minimal viable product to the product market fit? How or
Yeah.
when do you know you have that fit?
I would say it's your adoption rate. So if you look at the typical growth curve, right? That curve, graph you've all seen with the hump in the middle. So in the beginning, you've got these early adopters, and then you've got early majority, your peak, your post-peak, and so forth. The problem is many times those early adopters aren't the same customer profile as your larger group, being your early majority and majority, and that's your problem. It's called Moore's chasm, and you got to get over Moore's chasm, and there's a bunch of techniques to do that, but that stops more startups that actually have traction than anything else, because they stayed sort of too geekified. It resonated with a small population, and it didn't translate to the larger population because they didn't continue to do the customer interactions. So as you transition from each stage, you need to keep talking to customers, and so that you can make the modifications and adjustments in your product that make it resonate with that other customer or cohort. And that's the other thing. We tend to plot and track all of our customer growth as one number. Okay, we add 1,000 customers this month. We have 2,000 customers next month. Woohoo! And the third month, we've added another 1,000 customers. And the fourth month, another 1,000 customers. And we go, man, we got it now, right? Went from 1,000 to 5,000. I say there's a problem there. You have to do it from cohort to cohort. So if you follow the first cohort, all right, and you follow from month 1 to month 5, and you watch their churn rate, how many of them drop off, that'll give you a better understanding. And then you do the same thing for month 2, and that'll tell you if your next iteration is better or worse than the first one, based on your churn rate. And ideally, that month 1 to 2, right? You went from 1,000 users to 2,000 users, you doubled. But the next month, you added another 1,000 users. So it was 1,000 against 2,000. Instead of 100% growth, you had 50% growth. And the next month, you added another 1,000, right? So it was 1,000 to 3,000. You had 33% growth. In the final month, you had 25% growth. So you were actually slowing, not growing at the anticipated rate. So dealing with cohorts and the reasons why any specific group are doing what they're doing as a subset is really critical. Instead of trying to do things from macro, you got to get really micro with your customer base.
All right. We have a slightly unrelated question, but I think one that is still worthy to include here. So in what way does an incubator help a startup? How does it help them in this process of figuring things out, of developing their customer base, of that spectrum?
Well, incubators that I know are like what we do here. They are process driven. And everything I've been talking about tonight is a process. It's the step by step. It's the agile thinking, just like agile and Scrum is to engineering, lean startup is to entrepreneurship. So there's a methodology for everything, and good incubators embrace a process and don't let you get ahead of yourself until you've proven each of these things. And that's good. And then they should be surrounding you with the help you need, whether it's a mentor or multiple subject matter experts, and they should be with you on a timeline. The idea is to bring in the experts, the domain expertise, when you need it in sequence with what you're building. And that's because they're supposed to have the knowledge of having done it first. So that's the way. And then finally, as you've gone through this process and you've built something that people want and you've been able to articulate a marketing message based on what you've learned, you're only using their own words that resonate with them in your marketing campaigns, not what you think's cute, but what your customers are saying about you and why they use you. You regurgitate that in your marketing. When you start to get traction and it's time to scale, that's when you're going to need help in funding. And that's one of the critical pieces that incubators can do. We deal, with investors in the investment community, and a smart incubator is not doing things as much in mass in a demo day as they are finding smart money. So I define smart money as an investor who also has domain expertise in whatever you're building. So they can help you, and they can also, pick up the phone or send out an email to create strategic alliances, strategic partners for what you need. And of course, they are in a position to lead your future raises as well. So, the difference is dramatic. If I could give you a couple numbers. So without an incubator, just you're out there. The best numbers that I got were studies that were done by the Small Business Administration that's given out hundreds of thousands of guaranteed loans to businesses, many of them startups. So from month 1 through 60, 5 years, the average that were still operating, that received loans after 60 months, was only 20%. And by verticals, like restaurants, way, way fewer. So 20% success rate after 60 months. The National Business Incubator Association did the same study, and it wasn't thousands and thousands. There were 1,700 startups, but the same criteria, same amount of time, which was 60 months. 87% that went through an incubator were either still in business or had been acquired by someone else, which means they were still in business. 20%, 87%. And you talk about, stellar incubators like what Brad Feld has built at Techstars. Brad told me at Boulder, which is the one that they own completely, they have got like 7 or 8. They're even doing one with Disney now. But through him, 92% success rate. That's huge. So, that's a huge vote for incubators in general.
And then as far as, what exactly is the process for a young company, a startup, to even be considered by an incubator?
Yeah, so every incubator's got a different set of criteria. At Y Combinator, you're not getting in if you don't have traction. If you're not already selling something to a customer. See, I think even though Y Combinator calls themselves an incubator, I see them as an accelerator because they don't take early startups, right? They take companies that have traction and they are really, really good at scaling. And so that's the difference. But every incubator is a little different.
Then back to kind of the idea of measuring how your product's doing, not focusing on just those numbers.
Right.
What type of tools have you used, or do you know that are out there for
Yeah.
these entrepreneurs to try and track their cohorts, to track these
Yep.
first-time users throughout their experience?
Yeah, I do a whole workshop on that called Lean Analytics, the one metric that matters. And it's about getting yourself out of the mindset of using vanity metrics. Let me explain vanity metrics. In this boardroom I'm sitting in right now, every Monday I used to have our staff meeting, the 15 people that were here on my team. And one of the things I would do is say, hey, we had 3,000 new first time, people hitting our website, last week, yay, and what our growth is and how many last month and so forth. Well, that's BS. Who cares how many, unique visitors we had? It's important, and, the bounce rate's important. Conversion rate is certainly important, but the most important things are different. The metrics that matter are different for every startup, but in every startup, there's one pivotal, or maybe two things. To give you an idea, there was before Meetup.com, there was a company called The Point. It was like The Point, meaning meeting with people who had a common mindset of views. Okay, maybe it saved the rainforest, or it was sports or religion or something. And this startup had people come together in groups to talk about it. And they would meet in libraries or pizza places or wherever they could schedule it. And they raised a couple $1,000,000. They had 23 million people working there. And then the fall off became huge. They were doing thousands of these things, but people weren't going back. In fact, they ultimately laid off all 23 employees, and the three founders, two of them said, "We're gone. We've got families. We're closing it." The one guy that was left, he says, "I'm not quitting." So he's going through mounds and mounds of data, trying to find out why some people came back and others didn't. And it was this crazy thing. And he found the ones that were at a pizza place had recurring. They're the only ones that kept any kind of decent size. So he'd call them up and, "Hey, I'm Andrew Mason, from The Point. Thanks for, being our client. Hopefully, you enjoyed the conversation about your topic of interest." And they go, "Yeah, it was okay." And that you come back often. "Yeah, I do." And there just wasn't anything to build it on. There was no passion, no emotion. And he's getting frustrated. And so he started asking people, "Well, why do you come back?" And people would go, "Well, you know, when you held the meetings, you got a group discount for us. And we really went for the pizza." So from that, he pivoted and created Groupon. That was Andrew Mason. So it went from The Point being socially relevant, conversation, to a discount on pizzas. And of course, we know the rise of Groupon until finally, the board kicked him out, but he had a $800 billion exit, so nobody's going to hold a benefit for him. But that was the one metric that mattered. And the same kind of stuff happened at Airbnb. It took them 3.5 years to get to 1,000,000 nights, and less than a year to get to 3 million nights. And the one metric that mattered was, it turned out to be the type of camera that took the picture, right? So they were wondering, why do some places rent 3 times faster than others, and they may be in the same apartment complex, the same price, the same number of bedrooms, in the same neighborhood? They couldn't figure it out. So running everything through their computer systems, and they couldn't see anything themselves, and doing a query, what got spit out was the brand of the camera. Because, of course, everybody put their site, their home up or their apartment up digitally. So there were meta tags in every photo, and the computer could read the meta tags, where a human being would look at and see the picture, but not the meta tags. And the meta tags, it was about the equipment. So they're going, "What the heck is this? Why is this Canon, whatever it was, the difference between 3 times more rentals?" And someone said, "Well, that's a really expensive camera. It's like a 10 grand camera. Only professionals use that." Bingo. So the metric that matters was the quality of the photo. So to test that, they hired 20 some odd photographers in 20 cities to go out. And I think they went to 5 existing customers each, and reshot, and boom, that's what happened. So they changed their model to, if they accepted you, they would, at their cost, send a professional team to photograph and upload. And that was the difference that accelerated their growth, the one metric that mattered. Nothing else counted.
Wow, that's a really interesting story. So we have time for one more question, and it looks like the question is basically, how do you go about these same tactics or techniques for maybe not a concrete product? Maybe it's more like a service.
Sure.
What, if anything, changes for that?
Nothing changes. Your prototype, your pre-prototype, your prototype, your MVP is not going to be, physical, but it's still going to represent whatever you're going to do. Services are exactly the same thing. At the end of the day, it's a human being that you want to make the purchase or to take an action. And that take an action maybe give you an email address that is maybe not a purchase, but it's the same thing. It's a human being. We're all wired, a certain way, and so it doesn't matter. These tactics work on every type of customer for every type of business.
Awesome. So looks like we're going to be wrapping things up. But again, Michael, thank you so much for your time.
My
I
pleasure.
Learned a lot, and I hope our students did as well. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
That'd be great. Thank you, guys.
Yep. All right. Bye.
Bye.